Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy folks, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host Luke. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. Today's episode is going to be a very fun one. I'm actually really looking forward to this one because this game, it for me, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but for me, this is my game of the year. Generally, I've had such a fantastic time with it. I think I put about 18 to 19 hours into it. And getting all the collectibles and all that. Like, I've literally immersed myself in this world and in its characters. I enjoyed the first game. I can't wait to get into it. But before I get into all that fun stuff, got to do a bit of business first. So this episode and this show is sponsored by the wonderful people at World of Books. Because they're sponsoring the show, they've given me a code NERDY10 at checkout. That's NERDY or higher case 10. Use that code at checkout to get yourself 10% off on anything and everything that they sell on their store, from books to video games, old and new, to vinyls, anything and everything that is on their website, which is all saved from charity shops, landfills, all about recycling, all about being carbon neutral. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in and you want to save a bit of money, use my code NERDY10 at checkout and check out World of Books. And I want to thank them for sponsoring this episode and sponsoring this show. So, also, just want to do all the other stuff first because I've seen my analytics and I know that most of you folks don't listen till the very, very end. So I want to put it all in now. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod, and make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube at the Nerdstalgic podcast on YouTube. Just subscribe, like, share, and all that jazz. It really does help out. And obviously, if you follow me on Twitter, you get to get an update on everything that I'm doing, whenever I'm doing it, what games I'm playing, what movies I'm watching, what topics I'm going to cover, my thoughts and feelings about movie news and all that jazz. So yeah, follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod, and then make sure you subscribe to me on YouTube at the Nerdstalgic podcast. So on to the topic. So today I'm going to be talking about A Plague Tale Requiem. Now, before I get into it, it's story time. Not a big story time. This is a very, very short story time. I want to talk about my love of the first game of Just A Plague Tale Innocence, because I never got to review it, because when I actually played and finished it, I wasn't doing the podcast. So I did plan, hopefully, to go back and play it again and review it, because it's such a wonderful game that it is worth playing multiple times. But I never got the time. So what I felt like doing would be do a quick thing here, and before I start the review, because the review might be a bit of a long one, do a short introduction of my love of the first game. So I played A Plague Tale Requiem. I think it was sometime last year. It's been on Game Pass for a very, very long time. I don't think it's on Game Pass anymore. But it was one of those games that I downloaded at first, and I'm not big into sneaking sort of games where you've got to be sneaking, you've got to hide from enemies. I'm more of a like all guns blazing, going in sort of game, like a good FPS sort of shooter, role play, that sort of thing. Something where I can just be the tank and I'm just going to go in and just destroy everything. I don't like being stealthy. I like to be, the loud one. As I am in general, I'm a very loud person anyway. This is my personality. So when I first downloaded it, it was one of those where I was like, this game's very beautiful. It's very gorgeous. I can tell that there was a lot of time and effort went into it, but I can't be bothered to sneak around. So I played the first level, and then I just was like, it's interesting, but it's not for me. So I uninstalled it, and then months and months go by, and then I can't remember what changed. I think it was I think I'm a big achievement hunter, and I love to collect achievements. And I'm in a competition with my uncle, no, my second cousin. Sorry, I've got him on Xbox, and basically he is just a next level achievement hunter. He's so high up. I know I'm going to catch him. But we have this little competition where we try to outdo each other each month, who can ever get the most gamer score in each month. Sometimes I win, sometimes he doesn't. But this one month, he was just racking up the points, and I couldn't figure out how he was doing it. So I went onto his account and I saw that he'd been playing a Plague Tale Requiem. I mean, a Plague Tale Innocence, the first game. I figured, well, I didn't know that game was such, such easy achievements. You get achievements just for completing levels. You don't have to do anything, any specific things. So as an achievement hunter, my brain was going, my cogs were turning. So I looked into it. I downloaded the game and I started playing it. Lo and behold, what thing I was to realize is that the game is a lot more than just stealth. It's a lot deeper. It's a lot emotional. The characters are um, incredibly deep. Each one of them, the Daroon, Amicia, Hugo, everything, and even the whole story about the Immacula and the rats and the plague. Everything is just deep. It's dripped in lore. It's dripped in history, real history mixed in with the fairy tale history, of this game. So I just found myself enthralled, and I just was being pulled in so much that I just wanted to explore more of these characters and this world, and I just couldn't put the game down. It started off wanting just to play it just for the achievements. Then it got to the point of like, I'm no longer playing this for the achievements. I'm playing this for the story. The way the game should be played, the way any game should be played. You shouldn't play a game for the achievements. You should play the game for the game. So even though I was getting the achievements I wanted, they were second fiddle now. They weren't important anymore. What was the main fiddle, what was the main thing that really sort of tickled my pickle was the story, the characters, the visuals, everything was the gameplay was just excellent. So I completed it again. I think I actually put more hours into it because I played for it the first time, trying to get a few collectibles, and I ended up missing a few. And because I'm big for collectibles, but like only certain games will I bother to go back and collect all the collectibles, because there's many times where you play a game and it's like, oh, the collectibles are right, but it's not worth playing again to get them all, or you don't really get anything out of it. Whereas in the first game, and the same in the second game, as I'll mention later, is the fact of the collectibles are, feathers, and they're memories and moments where you can just connect to the characters more. You can have little moments between Amicia and Hugo where they talk to each other over certain flowers and stuff like that. So there was a story reason to go back and to find all these collectibles and to see what the characters say about them and how that reflects the world and the events that the story is taking place in. It's all very fascinating. It's all very interesting. I loved it. So I think like 21, 22, 23 extra hours into the game, going back and playing it a second time, and I just enjoying it. So when the game was when Asobo announced that they were going to make a sequel, and it was at E3, oh, I just lost my mind. I was like, this just looks bigger and better, and just looks so bombastically insane. I just can't wait for it. Um, so yeah, so that's my sort of first introduction to the Playtale series. I loved it. It started off not liking it, not liking the stealthy side of it, being very small-minded, then doing it for gains of the achievements, figuring out this game is a lot more than just achievements, and then just playing it as it should be played, as a game, and enjoying it for what it is and what it does and what it has to say. Honestly, that game, 10 out of 10. It's another 10 out of 10 game. Absolutely fantastic. This game is a 10 out of 10. I know I'm jumping ahead, a bit of a spoilers for the end, but this game for me is a 10 out of 10. Playtale Requiem. But that's enough of story time. See, anybody who gets that reference, who gets the nostalgia side of that, right? You can have extra points. I don't know what you can spend those points on, but you can put down extra points on a piece of paper and sign it. Luke said. I don't know. So that's story time over. One thing I want to talk about before we go into, because I'm very, very interested in Asobo Studios. And I just want to mention quickly about them and about their history, because I find them incredibly fascinating because they come up a lot, especially when I do my license-based sort of game reviews, my movie tie-in game reviews, that this company always seems to pop up somewhere, that they've had a hand in some games that I've played or looking into. And this is I'm not saying this is their first ever sort of like go at doing their own game, but they've been in the business a long time and they've done a lot of games, and they've been very much under the radar. So I just wanted to give those guys a bit of a shout out and give you a bit more information about them before we get on to the review. So Asobo Studios is a French video game developer based in Bordeaux and founded in 2002. The studio is most known for developing video game adaptations of several Pixar movies, A Plague Tale: Innocence, and the 2020 version of Microsoft's Flight Simulator. There's a huge thing on their website that goes into all detail about all the other things that they've done. But I'm just going to go down to the games. So from 2003 all the way up to the most recent 2022 with A Plague Tale Requiem, they've made multiple games that you probably have heard of, never played, or played but didn't even know they did. So they did Super Farm, Sitting Ducks, The Mummy, the animated series, which was a good TV show based off the Mummy movies. I remember watching it when I was younger. Great nostalgia. Absolutely fantastic. Nemesis Strike, Garfield, and Tale of Two Kittens. They did Ratatouille and WALL-E for the PlayStation 2. Now, if you listen to my WALL-E review, you mentioned that I did a whole section of a friend of mine, Felix, I don't have a nose, who actually played and reviewed the PlayStation 2 version of WALL-E, and how I said that that game was a lot more fun and interesting and had a lot more mechanics, even though it was on less powerful hardware. It just had more. It was more jam-packed, full of things than the Xbox 360 version that I played. Which then should that give you a reference of actually how good these guys were in terms of taking something and making the most out of what they could with the technology that they had. And it shows when you've got A Plague Tale: Innocence and Plague Tale Requiem how gorgeous that game is. That they're a double A developer, meaning they're not high level triple A like Bethesda or Call of Duty and stuff like that. They're more in the double A, so they're more Sniper Elite and stuff like that. But even so, their games are absolutely gorgeous. They build games on the levels that you would think they would triple A. You know what I mean? How good they are. You know what I mean? So seeing that they made WALL-E and that we're able to do so much with that game with such less powerful hardware than the next gen, the 360 and the PlayStation and the PC, absolutely floors me. So I have to give them credit for that. They did Fuel and they did Up for the PlayStation 2. They did Racket Sports Party. They did Toy Story 3 for the PlayStation 2. Racket Sports, Connect Rush, a Disney Pixar adventure. They did The Crew for the Xbox 360. You got Monopoly Plus, Fragments, HoloLens, Young Conquer, HoloLens, Recall for the Xbox One. They worked on that with Microsoft Studios. Disney Adventures, they worked on that. Zoo Tycoon Ultimate Animal Collection, they worked on that. The Crew 2, which they worked on for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And also now we finally, so that was the last game they actually did that wasn't theirs, or they didn't have hand in working on, was 2018 with The Crew 2. So since 2019, when they started working with Focus Home Interactive, they did A Plague Tale Innocence, then they did one for Microsoft Game Studios, which was Microsoft Flight Simulator, and then their most recent, A Plague Tale Requiem. And now, when I look at this, it just shows me a studio that's bided their time, a studio that's just taken the time to make connections with developers, make connections with studios, and say, we will happily make your game, port your game for this system, for the last gen sort of system. We'll prove how good we are and what we can do by making a game for the last gen, even though the next gen, current gen, the 360, PlayStation 3 and all that, are currently out. We will take the reins and we will do that, and we will just bide our time. And that's just what it tells me, that they learnt their craft, they learnt their talent by doing things for other people, making connections to finally get to a point where they were confident enough where we have a story, we have the skills, we have the technology, we have the understanding, we have the backing to prove that we can do what we say we can do, because we've had contracts with Microsoft, we've had contracts with Ubisoft and Disney and Pixar and all that jazz. We have the backing to prove that we know what we're doing. We've worked with big companies. Now it's time to go to a publisher like Focus Home Interactive and be like, look, this is our backlog. This is what we've done in the past. This is the story we have now. We can do it. We know we can do it. This is what we want to do. And then obviously the proof is in the pudding. It's shown. They made Plague Tale Innocence. The game was a masterclass, really high reviews, highly loved. Bam. Again, same time with Plague Tale Requiem. Same things happening right now. I've played it, another 10 out of 10. It's my game of the year. All the reviews that you see about this game is all very, very positive. Hardly anything negative, you know. And everybody loves the story. Everybody loves the characters. Everybody loves the visuals. Everybody loves the mechanics. Everything about this game is just one to one, in my opinion, anyway. Perfect. I have no issues with it. I have no issues with anything. So I'm I'm very happy for this studio. I'm glad they've finally been able to, you know, all this time biding their time and really honing their craft and honing their skills, that they are able to then go on to finally do their own series, do their own video games under their own banner, and be like, this is us, this is ours, this is what we made, this is from our minds. We're not having to port it anywhere else. We just have to do the best we can with what we can, because this is what we want to do. And I have to say that's quite that's what's the word I'm looking for now. That's very sort of inspiring. Um, the idea of just biding your time, taking it slow, and then when you're ready, come out all guns blazing. You know what I mean? Um, so that's Asobo Studios. I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. They're quickly becoming a very underdog studio, a very much of like a studio that I'm excited to see what they do next. Hopefully more Plague Tale, but if they come out and they want to do other sort of games that are not sort of stealthy, if they want to do a shooter, if they want to do an RPG, whatever it is they do next, I'm here for them. So I just wanted to give those guys a shout out. They probably would never ever listen to this, but if they ever do, I love you guys and keep doing what you're doing. You're fantastic. So that's the introduction. That's my love of Playtale Innocence, and that gives you a bit of a backstory on Asobo Studios. Time finally for the review. So the thing at the moment you've been waiting for, it's about to start. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it, shall we? Right, so A Plague Tale Requiem. Um, well, first of all, before I start, I just want to make it absolutely clear for anybody listening, I will not be talking about any spoilers, and I will tell you why in a minute. I'm mostly going to focus on the first few levels of the game. I might hint at features that come later in the game, but they are very small, minute, and they're not very game breaking. Well, I'm not game breaking. They're not very sort of spoilerific or anything like that. But as it pertains to the actual game itself and the story, no spoilers whatsoever. I'll just talk about the first few levels, and mainly because the story's that good and the story is that sort of twist and turny and interesting, and there is so much that happens in it that you have to experience it yourself. You know, I don't want to sit here and say X, Y, and Z happens, because then I've ruined it for you. Even if it's a game that you'd never want to play, it's a game that you should at least experience for yourself if you ever change your mind in the future. It's the same with the first game. It's one of those where, because the story is so entrenched, that you want to experience it yourself. You don't want to be told it. It's more impactful if you just experience it firsthand. So there'll be no story spoilers. There's going to be no sort of big sort of major plot points, anything like that. I'm just going to talk about the first few levels. So I just want to make that clear just to begin with. So on to the first part. So the story and characters. The story, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, to me is a masterpiece of gaming and game design. This whole game is just a masterpiece. The characters are all very deep and emotional. Like each character, whether it be a character that you only meet a few times, it's a character that stays with you to the very, very end, or the enemies, any sort of the enemies that you encounter, everything, anything that comes up, um, you have emotional connection to them. You either hate them deeply and you want them to die, or you want them to live and you want to get to know them better. You want to be their best friend. You want to spend time with them. Um, this game is a real emotional roller coaster, not just in story, but with its characters. The story follows again from these carrying on from the first game. You play as Amicia Daroon, and you are the protector of your brother Hugo, who is the carrier of a disease called the macula, which basically gives him superpowers. But it's a superpower that allows him to control rats. the game set in France during the plague. Um, I think the 16th or 17th, 1600s or 1700s, around about then, is when the story is sort of based. And you basically follow on the story with where you play as Amicia and you're looking after your brother, but you're also trying to find a cure for the macula with the help of the young alchemist Lucas. Which is always good just to find other characters with the name of Luke like whenever a character in a book or a game or movie or TV show is named Luke, I just love it because Luke is not a very common sort of name you hear in any sort of form of media. I don't know why. So when I played the first game and you meet Lucas, I was like, close enough. But you also get the mother, Patrice, the mother of Amicia, and Hugo, who is a more masterful alchemist who's also trying, with the help of Lucas, trying to find a cure for Hugo's affliction. And then the game goes on where you trying to find a cure and you're coming against roadblocks and the rats are coming back and you have to find your way to get past the rats, but also trying to get get away from bad people who want to use Hugo for his powers for the wrong and world domination and all that jazz. So as Amicia, you are the protector. Your job is to keep Hugo safe no matter what, right? So that's the main sort of story. If I get into spoilers, that is what this story is. It's carrying from the first game, but more, a lot bigger in terms of story. The story is a lot deeper. So that's as far as I'm going to go in terms of the story because I don't want to get into spoilers. But you in terms of the characters, again, Amicia's more fleshed out. Hugo's now, I think Hugo's a year or two older now, so he can do a lot more. He's a lot more experienced. He's seen death a lot more, so he's gotten used to it. He doesn't get as scared as much, and he's also getting more sort of in control. Well, there are moments where he's more in control of his powers, and then there's more time where the macula, the disease is within him, is in more control of Hugo. So it's like a 50-50. Sometimes Hugo's in control, sometimes the macula's in control. So the game and the story sort of entwines with that. You meet other characters like Sophia, Arnund. I feel like I'm butchering his last name. You meet the Count, and you meet loads of other people, and each one of their stories is deep. No character's one note. You don't just get a character of, "Hi, here I am so and so." I'm going to join you on your quest. Like no, like for example, Sophia that you meet halfway through the game, she's a smuggler and she'll tell you about a history of smuggling, and as you go on through the journey she'll give you just a bit of backstory here and there of why she became a smuggler and why she's helping you and she's helping Hugo. Again, it's the same with Arnold, it's the same with Lucas has his own sort of things going on that he's trying to find a cure, but as well as he's also trying to prepare Amicia and Hugo for what is to come. It's the same with Patrice, the mother. We didn't get much of her in the first game. We get a little bit more of her in the second game. We can see her connection to Amicia, how basically Patrice is no longer really in control of Hugo. He's no longer the mother archetype. Amicia has taken over as the mother archetype. She is basically like Hugo's mom in how she treats him and how she's always there, and how Hugo wants his sister more than he wants his mother because of what they went through in the first game. It's really deep. It's really emotional, and I don't really want to. Again, I'd love to get into it more. I really, really would, but I don't want to spoil it. But like the story and the characters is a masterpiece, and it all works fantastically. Especially as you get closer into the middle to the end of the game, where you get bombarded with so many twists and turns and revelations, and the story gets very deeper, and the story starts to change, and characters and their motivations change, and everything just comes to a head that you're like, it, you get to a certain point where you're like, okay, this is no longer like the first game. It completely changes and it becomes something completely different, something completely new, something completely fascinating. That for me, I couldn't put the controller down. I just had to keep playing because I was just so invested in these twists and turns that I needed to know what happened next. Literally, I completed this game. I'm recording this on the Wednesday. I completed the game on the, I think it was a Sunday or the, yeah, I think I completed it on the Sunday or the Monday. But I literally spent a whole week playing that game non-stop. When I wasn't volunteering or wasn't doing anything else, I was playing this game non-stop for hours, just because I just wanted to know what happened next, because the story was that sort of impactful and pulls you in. So that's the story and the characters. As for the gameplay, it takes everything from the first game and just improves upon it, you know, with new features, which I'll get onto the new features in a minute. But like I said, in the first game, you had your sling. You know, you could throw rocks at enemies, and you could upgrade it to a point where you could kill enemies with one shot if you hit them in the head. You know, you could extinguish fires using certain alchemy. You could make fires for the rats. So basically, whenever you had like the rat puzzles, use fire to find your way through the rat hordes, so you don't get eaten alive by a ton of rats. Now, I've read James Herbert's Rat trilogy. I've read the Rats. I've read the second book, and I've read Dominion, which is the third book. I'm entrenched. I'm a big fan of the Rats sort of books. The second one wasn't as good as the first or third one, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, I've read gruesome sort of books about rats eating people alive and tearing them limb from limb. Like, I've read those sort of stories. So me being a horror fan, that's kind of what sort of entrenched me in the first game to want to come back and play it and get so connected to it, and so sort of what's the word I'm looking for now? Addicted, that's the word. So addicted to the story was because of the rats, that if you messed up you would get eaten alive, but also you could use the rats to kill the enemies. That you could like, you'd have enemies that would walk around with flame torches, and you could extinguish their torches, and then the rats would just swarm and eat them. And then while the rats are off eating them, you could sneak around the rats and carry on with the game and with the puzzle. Very gruesome, very sick, because literally there'd be moments where you could move the rats off the bodies, and all like they would just be like nothing left. It would just be like a fleshy sack, like someone just pulled all the skin off a human, and they were just left with all the muscles and blood and veins all showing. Very gruesome, but I love that kind of stuff anyway. So for me, that's like extra points. But this game takes the gameplay of the first game, but just improves upon it. It adds in loads of new features like skills. So you have you have like the way you play the game affects what certain skills you get. So if you're a very sneaky person, you will unlock skills that allow you to crouch walk faster. That you can be a lot more sneaky. That you can, if you've got a knife, because knives are very sparingly, and Misi doesn't like to use bladed weapons, but you can find these little daggers hidden around each level, and with them you can sneak up behind enemies and you can sort of stab them and kill them. And that's very, very aggressive. But you know, there's a skill in the sneaky one where you can sneak up behind bigger, larger enemies, where usually you'd have to kind of take their armor off before you could kill them. You can sneak up behind them and you can kill them if you upgrade your sneaky more, and you can be a lot more quiet, and you can use your sling, and your sling will be a lot more quieter, so you won't be heard by other enemies when your sling's going off. You've also got your aggressive, your fighter attribute. So if you play a lot more aggressively, so if you decide not to play the game sneakily, that you decide to kill every enemy that you can, that's the aggressive side of it. You get the ability to, if there's fire, to sneak up behind enemies and push them into a fire. You also get the ability to strangle enemies with your sling and stuff like that. So you also get your optimistic one as well, which is where your alchemy, where you can craft things better, you can get better sort of concoctions. So I think one of the final ones is that you get these little jars that you can fit, like you can put I think it's a mixture of tar and sulfur. And so if you get this certain upgrade, you can throw it at any sort of flame and it would make a big explosion and it would kill unarmored enemies. And again, determine how you'd want to play the game would determine what sort of skills you play. So you could have a 50-50. You could have a balance of all three. You know, you could have a bit of sneak, you can have a bit of aggression, you can have a bit of optimistic. It just depends how you decide to play. Like for me, my skill was almost maxed out. I was missing one final upgrade for being sneaky, because I like to play sneaky. Which, even though I said that at the beginning I'm not a big sneaky sort of person, well, in terms of this game, I like being sneaky. You know, and I guess it's the same as well for like an Assassin's Creed fan now, of the new Assassin's Creeds, not the old Assassin's Creeds. Um, because obviously those games sort of give you the option of like most Far Cry games do, most Ubisoft games do, where they give you the option where you can sneak but you don't have to. So it's that fact of like, I'll sneak around for a bit, but if I get caught, I know I can at least handle myself and go all guns blazes if I need to. Whereas in this game, if you get caught, you're dead. Unless you can run away and hide, um, you don't get many ways to defend yourselves. You know, you have enemies that don't. If you have an enemy that wears a helmet, unlike the first game where you could hit an enemy's helmet off the head, you can't do that now in this game. Literally, like you can kill. If the enemies don't wear a helmet, you can throw your sling at their head and you can kill them with a rock. Um, but you can no longer kill armored enemies. But you do get given a crossbow later in the game. But again, the crossbow bolts, you've got to use them sparingly because you don't get many of them. And the crossbow bolts, again, you can put sort of alchemy on them. You can put fire on them. You can put tar on them and stuff like that. And the sort of uh, not reignition, what's it called, sort of a light extinguish. You can put like an extinguished powder on a light, on certain lights, and you can use them in a different way. But again, it's that sort of thing of like, you've got to try and be very sparing how many sort of knives you use, because you don't get many. How many crossbow arrows do you use, because again, you don't get many. So in the gameplay, especially when you play it on the higher levels, you're constantly trying your best not to use things, not to try to be, again, trying to be stealthy is key, especially when you get to the higher levels. You can't help not be stealthy, because when you play it on the easiest difficulty, which is narrative, you can afford to not be stealthy. You can afford to be seen. You can afford to at least try to run away. But in the harder difficulties, you can't run away. If you get seen, you've got to deal with that enemy as quick as possible, because they're coming for you. And if you hide, they will know where you are and they will find you. Very much like the Nemesis um, from from Resident Evil. You know, so very much like, you've got to be a lot more stealthy. You've got to be a lot more conserved about what you use and when you use it, because you never know when you'll need it. So yeah, it's all well and good using it here. It's all well and good using it for this level, but you might get to another level where you need that one thing that you used, but you no longer have it. So now that makes that level harder. You know what I mean? Um, so it's a catch-22. You know, you need to use it, but you don't want to hoard it. And again, at the higher levels you play it, and the game just gets harder, and the enemies just get a lot more smarter, to the point of, it's not overly difficult. It's not like the hardest game in the world. It just takes a lot of patience and a lot of time to complete certain levels. So that's the skills. Again, they're upgrades. So you can upgrade your sling, upgrade your crossbow, upgrade your alchemy, upgrade your gear, upgrade your instruments, stuff like that. So you can upgrade your gear so you can actually hold more. You can upgrade your crossbow so you can it hits harder, and that, you know, your arrows are a lot harder. So again, it's very, very important, as I mentioned, about conserving ammo for like your crossbow. You can get an upgrade for it by collecting pieces, which again are very hard, not very easy to find. You mostly find them by exploring each level. But again, when you plan the harder difficulties, it's one of those where it's a fact of, do I have the sort of time to explore, and you know, the sort of, am I able to look around without being caught? Because I know if I get caught, I'd have to start the level over again, or last checkpoint, and all the progress that I made is now gone. So it's the fact of, do I have the time to actually look around safely? But if you can find the pieces, you can get upgrades. And one of the upgrades for your crossbow is that your crossbow bolts are now more hardened. Means that if you shoot an enemy with them, they won't just break on impact. And once they've killed the enemy, you can recover them, which makes that sort of feature a lot more easier. One of the downsides behind that is the fact of, you know, yeah, you've just killed an enemy, but now all the other enemies know that you've killed him. So now it's a fact of, you know, yeah, it's all well and good that I can harvest it later, but can I actually go and get it? Am I able to run over there as quick as possible to reclaim that bolt that I've shot him with, and get back to my hiding spot without being seen, without raising any alarms? You know, again, it's a catch-22. You're doomed if you don't. You've got to keep moving forward to progress the story, but you've just got to be a lot more smarter about it. You've got to be smarter than the rats. You've got to be smarter than the AI. You know, so playing this game on high difficulty is a real joy. It's a real good, decent challenge. I like it. So that's the gameplay. You know, it's if you played the first game, it's very much the same. Um, so there's no real difference. They just improved upon a lot of things, added new things in, taken a few things out. For example, they've added in pyrite, which basically you can put into your sling. So if you ever get to a moment where you mess up with the rats, you can press Y and you can slam this pyrite, and it will start making a big flame in front of you. And what that means is the fact of it will clear the way for you to get to safety from the rats. The rats won't swarm you, but again, they're very hard to find. They're very rare, you know. So again, once you found them, it's hoarding them and conserving them till you really need them for the next time that you fuck up, really, which you will do, especially on the higher difficulties, because it's easy to do. Even when you know what you're doing, you will fuck up once or twice. And again, it's part of that risk. It's about that learning curve. It's the fact of, you know, trying things out, experimenting, and seeing what happens. You know what I mean? Um, and that's what this game is. It's about experimenting of what works. Like when you play it on the easier difficulty, it's a breeze. But when you start playing on the harder difficulty, that's when this game really starts to open up. And it's that risk reward and sort of the learning things, trial and error. You know, and I really commend it for that. Now on to the collectibles. So you've got these collect. I love the collectibles in this series because, as I mentioned at the beginning, these collectibles, they're not like standard, like, oh, collect so and so things and you might win. You might get an achievement, or you know, you might get like concept art and that sort of thing. I love collectibles that have a narrative purpose. One of my like I when I was in university, one of the dissertation that I wrote was about collectibles and horror in story based horror games. So if I remember, I did Bioshock, Until Dawn, and there was a third game, but I'm blanking on it. Um, but if you played those games, like if, for example, in Bioshock, you get the voxophones, which are audio logs that allow you to um, listen to the world and to the characters. And the collectibles are very story driven, so you get more idea of the characters that are speaking, but also the events that took place before Rapture went down and after Rapture went down. You know, and same with Until Dawn. Until Dawn uses the totem system, which give you a look into the future of like uh, things to look out for. Like if you mess up here, you get your death totems, so that it'll show you how you will die. Or you've got your luck totems, and you've got this totem and that totem. Each totem works in such a way that it narratively tells you, look out for this, pay attention to that, be careful here, or this will happen. You know, so I like collectibles that do that sort of thing, where it's like it gives you a more in-depth narrative focus, a more story focus sort of collectible. And it's the same here with Hugo's collection. So it, in the first game, you collected flowers. In the second game, you collect flowers at the beginning, but then the story sort of progresses on, and you find yourself in a field. Again, this is not sort of spoilers, but you find yourself in a field by a tree, and Hugo spots a feather, and Hugo goes, "Oh, that's a beautiful feather." And then from then on, as the story goes on, you start collecting feathers, and even there's a one moment in the story where you collect a feather, and one of the companions that's with you and Hugo says, "Oh, that's very nice." You know, something under the lines of, "How long have you been a fan of feathers?" And Hugo goes, "Oh, I used to be a fan of flowers, but I prefer feathers now." You know, again, it's not important. It's not a really big sort of part of the story. It's just one of those sort of things of like, for those of you who've been going out of your way, the collectors and the completionists who've been going out of the way to find all these collectibles, you get a little sort of recognition of as to why you're now collecting feathers instead of collecting flowers, you know. Um, and I love that. And also, it's not just a collectible; it's also a decorative piece. So in the first game, as well as this one, whenever you'd find a flower with Hugo, Hugo would tell you the name of the flower, what it represents, what it means, and then he would put the flower in your hair, and that'd be a lovely little sort of thing between it wouldn't change the game, it wouldn't make the game easier or anything like that. It'd be a little cosmetic thing in cutscenes for that one level of like Amicia having a flower in her hair. And then when we started collecting feathers, Amicia has flowers, Hugo has feathers. So when we started collecting feathers, Hugo would then start wearing each feather, and again it'd be Amicia telling Hugo the flower of the bird and what the bird represents, and then giving the flower to Hugo. So again, it's that very brother and sister connection. It's a very loving, sort of deep emotional connection. You know what I mean, between them, where Hugo loves flowers, loves plants, so he tells Amicia this and shares this with her, and he wants to give her flowers to protect her or to give her confidence or to give her luck. Again, very very beautiful, very lovely. And then Amicia knows a lot about birds. So she tells Hugo about the feathers and what they mean, and they make him feel bold, they make him feel brave, they give him courage. It's a very beautiful brother sister sort of thing that again me having an older sister and a younger brother, something that I can relate to, and anybody who has any sort of other siblings can relate to. It's one of those things that you can't explain unless you've got a sibling. You can't explain that bond, but it's a very beautiful, very sort of emotional bond. It's very lovely to be a part of as the player. Again, this is a very narrative focused story, so as a player it's nice where you can get insights into these small moments where you just get to just watch and observe. Brother and sister, two characters, just showed how much they care and love about each other, and how they would happily, the idea of Hugo feels better and more confident knowing that his sister now has a certain flower that represents a certain thing, and Amicia feels braver knowing that she has it and that she has the love of Hugo, and vice versa with the flowers. So it's really really nice. And also, if you go on your codex as well, you can actually read a lot more about these sort of flowers and about these feathers and about the birds. And again, it's a little backstory, a little bit extra bit of context story wise that you get to see, and also things that you can look for in the codex if you want to, while you're relaxing, while you're not in sort of situations where you've got to be sneaky. Also, as well as collectibles, you also find things that are called souvenirs, which are basically memories. In the first game, there were souvenirs, like there were objects that you could find throughout each level, and each object would give you a more in-depth sort of to each situation, to each sort of level. It's kind of been changed now, so you now have things called souvenirs are now memories, where you can share with Hugo, or you can share with Lucas, or you can share with other sort of companions that you meet throughout the story, where you can. Each one's different. So there is one where you share with Lucas this person. Again, this is not a spoiler. This is something that you'll only find if you was to go looking for it. Otherwise, if you follow the path that the story tells you to take, you'd miss it completely. But there is one moment where you find yourself with Lucas, and you find loads of dead people, and in the very hidden corner, there's one person that's still alive, that's just clinging onto the edge of life, and you sit down with Lucas to this person. You hold their hand as they slowly start to as they're dying, they're waffling on. I know it sounds horrible to say that because it's more emotional. It was lack of a better word, but they're just going on about certain people that they wish they could do more, and how like they can't believe this happened, and eventually they pass away and they die. And again, it's one of those memories that you can that Amiso and Lucas share, of that moment of like, this is what happens and this is what comes when we have the Immacula, and why we need to cure it, and why Hugo isn't safe, and why we need to cure Hugo because innocent people are dying, and stuff like that. So again, it gives you more context and depth to the world and to the story, as well as gives you a sort of a way to reflect of like, this is the effect that it has on people that we don't see. We only see the playable characters. We don't see what the NPCs will go through, because nobody thinks about NPCs, because why would you care about an NPC? Why would you care about a non-playable character? You know, their role is to run and scream. Their role is to just be cannon fodder. You know what I mean? So to give you an extra in depth of the actual people that live in this world, it makes the world feel more lived in, feels more real, feels more sort of. The world is really at stake. It's not just affecting these characters; it's also affecting everybody else. So it gives you a lot more in-depth sort of to the story, and a more in-depth connection between Amicia and Lucas. Now, there's ones that Amicia and Hugo share. There's one where Hugo pushes Amicia on a swing. Again, no spoilers, but it's a very loving moment between brother and sister. So there are sort of certain memories throughout the game where you can find that you get to spend time with certain characters and certain companions that you just get a little extra bit of story, but also you feel like your connection to the character that you're with, the companion or whatever, at the time, you get a deeper understanding of them, they get a deeper understanding of you, and the friendship and the loyalty starts to evolve because you've had those little moments, those little memories to share with each other, whether it be lovely or horrific. You still have that connective bond that holds you together because of what you've been through. So they work really, really well, and it also, again, it just gives you the characters' thoughts and feelings of the events of the world, of what's happening around them, and how it's affected them, or how it's affected the things that they see, or the things that they used to love, and so on and so forth. So I really like the collectibles in this game. Um, yeah. So that's the main bulk of the review. I've got a little bit left to do before we end, but I want to take a quick break. And after the break, we'll come back and we'll finish it off. And yeah, so I'll catch you in a minute. Right. So for part two of the review, I want you to do something a bit different because I figured I can't talk about spoilers for the game because I don't want to ruin it for anybody, because it's one of them, like as I mentioned, it's one of them stories that you have to experience for yourself. But I didn't want this review to be too short. That's why I kind of talked a bit more about my love of the first game at the beginning to kind of really beef it out, so you get a better understanding of where I stand. Um, but also, I figured it'd be fun to tell you some tips and tricks. So if I ever convince you to play this game, or if you played the first one but you're a bit unsure about the second one, I thought I'd give you a few tips and tricks that I used and I felt was helpful for when I played the game, when I played the first game, when I played this one, and things that helped me and the things that I found are quite useful. So um, that's what this section is. It's Luke's helpful tips for Plague Tale Requiem. So I think this one should be quite interesting. So for high levels, if you're gonna play this game and you're gonna decide to play it on the high levels, or this could work at any level, but primarily if you decide to play this on a high difficulty, one thing that you have to make use of the most is the photo mode. One thing this game allows you to do is to take photos. Where if you go onto the menu, you go to photo mode, and it allows you to take photos of you that you can share on like Facebook, on basically anywhere and everywhere, on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, all that jazz, right? It just allows you just to take photos, to save them, and to share them. Photo modes become very, very popular now in many, many games. And one of the benefits of this game is that when you go into photo mode, you're in free roam mode, which basically means that you can move the camera anywhere and anywhere. Now there is a limit to how far you can actually take the camera. You can't go too far away from the main character, so where you're standing. But you can go quite far. And one of my biggest tips, and one of the things that I used the photo mode for, especially on harder difficulties, was, remember how I mentioned that if you get seen on high difficulties, you're virtually screwed, that you can try your best to escape if you're lucky, but it is kind of hard to escape. You kind of have to deal with the enemies. So knowing where all enemies are at all times is a big benefit. So I use the photo mode to peek around corners. So if I've got a hidden corner that I can't see what's around, if there's an enemy there, or if there's rats, or if there's anything like that that I need to be aware of, I'll put on the photo mode and I'll zoom out and I'll go around the corner. I will look around the corner, I look around the airboss and be like, so that enemy's over to the far left, so as long as I stick to the right, I should be okay. There's an enemy around the corner of this, but there is a sort of box of armor that I know I can throw a stone at. If I throw a stone at, that will distract the guard, and there's a door over there so I can sneak behind him. So in my mind, I'm using the photo mode as basically a strategy tool, kind of like if you was to play an RPG sort of game where that allows you to in real time sort of slow the game down and send your enemies off to send your characters off to fight certain enemies using certain abilities. It's kind of like a tactical sort of way. That's why how I use it, where I zoom out and I just see where all the enemies are. I can see where I am, and I can kind of plot my course of where I have to go. But also, one of the benefits of using this is that the photo mode clips through walls, Means that if you are an achievement hunter, you're a collector, you want to get all the collectibles, all the hidden chests, or if you're trying to find pieces, upgrades, so you want to find chests that have pieces in them, you can use the photo mode. So any sort of thing you can pick up, whether it be a knife or a pot or academic sort of vials, so you can make sort of potions and that sort of thing. They all get highlighted so you can see them. So that's why I found a lot of the knives in the levels, was by using the camera and be like, oh, there's a knife over there. So if I make my way over there, pick that knife up, and there's cover up there I can hide after I found it. So it's one of those sort of tools where you can use it for combat, you can use it for stealthiness, but you can also use it for searching around and using collectibles, stuff like that. Like, there are many times where like one of the things that this game would do, they would just have doors that you can interact with that don't open, and you can spend ages and ages and ages trying to find ways to open these doors, just in case there's like a collectible or like a secret chest hidden behind them. 9 times out of 10, they're just a door. And I use photo mode to actually look behind these doors, because you can clip through walls and you can actually see the kind of machinations of how the actual level design side of it all, and how the game's sort of made. And you can actually go through and just look of like, oh, there is a room behind here, but there's nothing in here that I can interact with. So generally, it is just a locked door that I can interact with just for story sake, you know. I got myself killed the once by trying to get a door like that. Like, there was a door that I knew I could interact with, and it was surrounded by rats. So I tried my best to kind of, I think I got a jar of tar. I threw it at the ground, set it on fire, and I quickly ran over. Tried my best not to set myself on fire, to kind of interact with this door. I interact with it, the door doesn't budge, and then my light goes out. I get swarmed by rats, and I'm eaten. So I was like, screw that. So I put the camera on, only to find that that door doesn't go anywhere. That literally it's a drop off, that the world just ends after that door. Like, that door opens, and it's just the abyss, the void of game design. You know, so I'm like, I get it why they do it, but it's also very annoying, the fact of like, don't give me a door that I can interact with if I can't go anywhere, or I can't eventually open it. You know what I mean? So again, it's a little tedious here and there, but coming back to it, yeah, make sure you use the photo mode, especially on the higher difficulties. You want to know where every enemy is, where they are, what they're doing, what kind of enemy they are. You know, you need to know where objects are, because, like I said, resources are very, very sparse. The higher levels you go, it's harder to find resources. So any resource that you can find and scavenge as much as possible, do it. So make sure you use the photo mode. It is your friend. It will save your life many times. Trust me, it saved my life many, many times. Just, even though it doesn't give you a real time, like the character, when you put photo mode, everything stops, all the enemies and the characters and everything just stops moving. It's still nice to see where enemies are where they're facing, if they're facing towards you or if they're facing away from you. It helps so much. Great, it's a great help, really, really is. So I highly recommend using the photo mode. My tip number 2: make sure when you get around to upgrading, some people, if you're in it for the achievements, save up all your pieces till the very, very end, and then upgrade everything all at once, right? Um, but if you want to play the game, well, not that if you're a achievement hunter, you're not playing the game properly. But if you want to play it properly and you want to make the game a bit easier for you, especially on the high difficulty, you want to make sure you put your right upgrades in the right upgrade tree. So my tips for me, one thing that helped me was, you want to upgrade your instruments first and then your gear. Right. The reason you want to do your instruments first is because your instruments would allow you to um, what it does is that when you upgrade your instruments, it eventually gets to the point where you don't need a upgrade tool, because you get these certain tools that are hidden throughout the level, and they're upgrade tools, and they allow you to upgrade yourself. Now, if you upgrade your instruments, you eventually get to the point where you don't need an upgrade tool; you just need the pieces. You know, but also you can have this one sort of skill that you unlock quite early on, which, whenever you find any sort of resources that you already have enough of, like too many like jars, too many bits of sulfur, too many bits of crystal, too many bits of um, alcohol or whatever. If you have too many pieces of them, you can pick them up and you can go towards them, and it says recycle. So you press the recycle button, and it'll give you one piece. And even though it's only 1 or 2 extra pieces, it's still very, very helpful when in terms of looking to upgrade nearly everything. Now, unless you go around and you hunt everywhere, you probably won't find every single piece hidden in the game. So you probably won't unlock everything by the end. But being able to have upgrade your gear so that you can carry more um, means that you can find more resources and be more stocked up. But also, if you have too many of the same resource, you can also recycle it for the upgrade. So it makes things, it's a win lose. It's quite helpful. But also one of the helpful bits about upgrading your gear is that you can carry more knives and you can carry more pyrite. Right? The reason why I should mention the reason why knives and pyrite is so important is because when an enemy goes to attack you, you can counter them. So you can counter with a sling, and you can just hit them in the face with a sling, and that will daze them at first and allow you to run away. If you have a knife, you can press Y and you can shank them. You can stab them, kill them, run away, they die. But the problem is that's a lot of noise, so that causes a lot of people to be attracted to your area where you are. But also one of the upsides of a knife is that you can use it to unlock secret chests throughout the level. And those secret chests have tons of pieces in them, tons of resources, an upgrade tool, and it will just allow you to upgrade your stuff. Now, one of the upsides of upgrading your instruments is that eventually you won't need an upgrade table. You will be able to upgrade yourself enough on the instruments level where you can just upgrade yourself whenever you want, which is incredibly helpful because there might be a moment or situation where you really need a certain upgrade, where you have enough pieces, but you're nowhere near an upgrade table, and you probably won't see another upgrade table for a few levels. So it's always good to have that option of like, I'm surrounded by loads of enemies. I need a certain sling upgrade so I can rapid fire two rock shots at once instead of one each time, so I can quickly sort of make a part them like the Red Sea, make a gap so I can run through them and run away. It's always good to have that sort of back in your back pocket, knowing that you can do that. But also, like I mentioned, the hidden chests, they're very helpful. And again, as a collectible, you can find all them and get, I think it's like 30 G, 30 gamer score if you find them all. So it's really, really helpful to do that if you're an achievement hunter like myself. Like, I haven't got every achievement. I'm still missing one secret chest. I know where it is. It's just the fact of when I found it, I didn't have enough knives. I'd used my last knife to unlock a prior secret chest in the level before it. So I'm going to have to play the game again just just to get this one chest, which sadly for me is kind of halfway to the middle of the game. So it's not as sad because I enjoy this game, so I don't mind doing it. But it just means that it's not something I can do quickly. It's something I'm going to have to do for quite get. I'm going to have to go through quite a while till I finally get to that part, so I can upgrade it. You know what I mean? So it's going to take me a while to get that achievement, but I will go back and get it. But it's always helpful just to upgrade your instruments and your gear first, so you can upgrade your stuff whenever you want. You don't need an upgrade tool, and to upgrade your pockets so you can carry more resources and you can carry more knives, carry more pyrite, so that if you ever find yourself in a sticky situation with the rats or enemies, you can always know that you've always got a few knives and a few pyrite handy. But also, it's just helpful if you want to do the collectibles with the secret chest. So having at least 3 knives on you is always quite comforting, knowing that I've collected so many knives that I should be okay finding all these chests. So it's very, very important. And finally, now I've given you my big tips. Make sure you use the photo mode and make sure that you upgrade your instruments and your gear, especially if you're playing higher levels. They're key. They're very, very important. But one thing I wanted to mention just before we wrap up at the end was that I don't know. From my research, I don't think they are. I think as Bozo are still a sort of privately owned company. They make their own games. They just use publishers. But if I was Microsoft and I was like, if somebody came to me and I was working at Microsoft, Phil Spencer came to me. He went, Luke, we've got some money left over. Um, we can only buy one more studio. We can't buy any more studios. We can only buy one more, and that's it for the next, say, 5 to 10 years, right? We can only afford one more. What studio would you want to look into acquiring to bring under the Xbox Game Studios banner? And I'll be honest with you, out of all the studios, I would always find myself coming back to as Asobo Studios, mainly because, as I mentioned, they're a double A studio that have proven that they can make a game on the level of a triple A. You know, if you didn't know that they were a double A studio, which most people don't, most gamers don't, most mainstream audiences don't even know what double A and triple A means. Basically, a double A sort of studio is like a low budget sort of indie sort of studio that have published a few games, have had somewhat success, but they're not in the mainstream. Like, they're not very well known as a BioWare or Bethesda or anything like that. That's a double A. So a double A is like, I suppose, those studios, and also people like Spiders, people like um, trying to think of what their name, Rebellion, who make the Sniper Elite games and all those sort of games. They're double A. They're well known, but they're not mainstream-ish. They may publish their own games, and they do quite well. Whereas, your triple A sort of games, the companies that are like, who make Call of Duty, Activision and Ubisoft and um, BioWare and Bethesda, they're double A. Those are the people that make the big sort of buck sort of games, the games that make millions and millions and millions of ludicrous dollars. So that's what that means. But they, I suppose those studios have proven many times that they can make a game that is on a double A budget, but it looks like a triple A game. It plays like a triple A game. The story, the visuals. I ain't even spoke about the visuals. This game is just gorgeous. Playing this on the Xbox Series X, it just pops. It's just like, I know this isn't important, right? And again, it's got nothing to do with the story. And you're all going to think I'm really weird and creepy. But there is this one level that you're in, and you're looking at this view, and it's a beautiful view, absolutely gorgeous vista, real good field of view. There's so much detail. There's no sort of and nothing, even in the distance. Things in the distance are hardly detailed. But even though all of that was gorgeous, the one thing that I was focused on, because you're on a balcony, you're on this, like, there's this wall ahead of you, in front of you, that you can kind of interact with, and Hugo looks over and looks at the view. And one thing that caught my eye the most was, before you get to the wall, there are these like seagulls or birds sitting on the edge of this little wall, again enjoying the view. And as you walk over, they fly away. Obviously, as you would imagine in real life, where if you're in a small sort of little fishing sort of village, little fishing sort of town, they're going to be a lot of seagulls, and there's going to be a lot of bird shit. There's going to be a lot of bird poo. And one thing that caught my eye the most, and again, it's a small little detail, but again, it's this attention to detail, to world building, that I love what these guys do. That there was individual designs for bird shit on the side. And again, I know I'm going to sound creepy for looking at the bird shit when I should have been paying attention to everything else that was going on, but I was just so amazed about how well thought about, how well placed the bird shit was, how detailed it was. Like, even when I even used the photo mode to zoom in onto the certain bits, not just the bird shit, but the certain details on the wall, just to kind of see the textures, to see the textures in the trees, and to see the detail on Amicia and Hugo's face, and in the hair physics and all that. I was looking deep into these things, and I kept coming back to the bird shit. I've just been like, this looks good. Like, bird shit shouldn't look this good. Bird shit, it's shit. I know I've said shit multiple times now, but it's poo. You know, it shouldn't look as good as it does, but it does. And again, that's just attention to detail. Now, I'm not saying that Microsoft should acquire them because how good they are at detailing, excrement, but it's one of those where it was just like that attention to detail that a group of designers was like making this world look so beautiful and so gorgeous, that they would take the time just to add the extra detail. It's a detail that nobody would, or really should, apart from my weird ass, really notice. But when you do notice it, you appreciate it, because you're like, whoa, they actually put the time into this. It's not important. It doesn't break the game. It doesn't affect the game. It doesn't affect the story. It's fecal matter. It's bird droppings. But it's a lovely detail to see, which you never thought I'd ever say about feces. But here we are. You know what I mean? But even on the gruesome side of it, when you've got corpses sprawled up everywhere, when you've got the detail with the light shade and how powerful the light is, and the ray tracing, it is, oh, everything in this game is gorgeous. And that's what I come back to, that if I was working at Xbox, I would say this is the studio that we need to look into acquiring, because as I mentioned when I talked about their history, they've had a long history of not just working with Microsoft and not just doing well with working with Microsoft and working on Microsoft Simulator and all things that they were able to do with that game, and how good Microsoft Simulator is, but also, that in their past, how they've been able to work with the likes of Disney, works with the likes of Pixar, and do it quite well and quite proficiently. Again, I mentioned it before, how good their how good their version of Wall-E was, and even though it was on PlayStation 2, that game shouldn't have been better than the next gen, but it was, and it makes no sense. But again, it does when you know these guys, and obviously the dedication they have and the skills they have, that if these folks were given a bigger budget, because one thing that Microsoft does when they acquire a studio is that they give you full reign. The idea is the fact of, make whatever you want, but just know that you have the backing and support of a big company like Microsoft behind you. So I would love to see what this like as it is now, what this studio does when it's privately owned is impeccable, is incredible, is generally a masterpiece, and it is just amazing, right? So there's that. Then if you look what they could do if they had the unlimited potentiality, untapped, like literally funnel of cash from Microsoft, what they could do, what the next Plague Tale game would look like, what it would be, you know, what would their next game be if they after this it was like, we're going to take a break from a Plague Tale series and we're going to start a new series, or we're going to make a new game. What would that game then look like if they had the budget that Microsoft could afford to give them? You know what I mean? And that's the questions that I ask, because it fascinates me just to see what this studio could do. And not just that, they already have a good relationship with them, because a Plague Tale Innocence did really, really well on Game Pass. A Plague Tale Requiem came out day one on Game Pass. So they've already got a good sort of communication with them, a good relationship with Microsoft. So why shouldn't Microsoft be like, you know what? Let's look into inquiry. Let's bring you into the Microsoft family. Let's bring you into the Microsoft Game Studios network, and let's see what we can do. You know what I mean? And I think that that would be a good idea. And they've got the experience. They know what they're doing. They've shown that they're capable. That I just feel like it would be a good idea to bring them into the fold. But again, I don't work at Microsoft. Sadly, I'm not able to kind of pinch Kevin Feige's ear and tell him what I think he should do, because he's a smart man. He knows what he should and shouldn't do. But yeah, if I had the option, if I had the choice that they was to buy one more game now and then they couldn't buy another game for another 5 to 10 years, I would say Asbozo Studios, hands down, buy them, and just to allow them to do what they were doing already, just give them the budget that they need. That's it. Yeah, wow, they're a fantastic studio. But that's it. That's all she wrote. That's all I have to say about that. Let's move on to the end, shall we? But don't take my word for it. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that segment is back, where I ask my fellow podcasters to, well, I guess you could say, cast their views. See what I did there? That will become clearer in a minute. On a topic, or the topic that I'm talking about. And today I have the wonderful Dan from Casting Views to give me his view on A Plague Tale Requiem. Now, I think I mentioned him here and there in this episode. We've had a long chat about this game before I started playing it and after I started playing it. We got really nitty gritty into the spoiler sections of it. I have listened to his message, and I do promise that anybody who's listening worries that Dan might give away spoilers. He doesn't give away any spoilers. If anything, he leaves you more intrigued, and if anything, he leaves me in the dust of how good of a podcaster he is, because in 1 minute he just proved that he is way better at this than me. I know you'll disagree with me on that one, but I think it's about time that I stop rambling and we listen to Dan's views on A Plague Tale Requiem. Right, guys, let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Dan from Casting Views. Luke recently asked me whether I'd be happy to provide my opinion on A Plague Tale Requiem. Luke, not only would I be happy to, but I'd actually love to. I think it's a great game. Definitely, for me, game of the year. From the mechanics, how they build up on certain things like the stealth, the puzzling, the weaponry, the enemies. The voice acting, for me, absolutely brilliant. Charlotte McBurney, who plays Amicia, stand out in the first game. Absolutely brilliant in the second game. Graphics, stunning, especially in the bright, colourful scenery. The story is brilliant. I won't spoil it, but towards the end, there's a pivotal point, and the last 4 or 5 chapters gallop along at such a pace that I mentioned it as being intense. If you've got an Xbox and you've got Game Pass, there's no reason for you not to play it. Do it now. Seriously, you won't be disappointed.
And thank you very much, Dan. And to be honest, mate, you're really, really welcome. I'll have you back anytime, and maybe sometime in the future we need to actually get on and actually have a proper conversation either on your channel or my channel. As I said, no spoilers there, but it doesn't just leave you intrigued. Doesn't he just leave you interested in what's on what the game's about? He does a way better job than me in 1 minute than I did in like an hour. So I just need to buck up and straighten up and fly right, as they say, kind of hone my skills to this. Well, thank you very much, Dan, from Casting Reviews, for giving me your opinion. And yeah, let's move on to the end now, shall we? So here we are at the end. That is all she wrote. We are now at the end of the review. Thank you very much for listening, as always. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed my time with this game, and talking about it was really nice. I found myself talking to the guys from Casting Views, and we just spent a good hour just talk. I remember when I mentioned that I was going to sit and play this game, he was like, as soon as you played it, as soon as you completed it, please message me, I need someone to talk about this game with. So once I completed it, I messaged him, I completed it, blown away, X, Y, and Z, and all that jazz. Again, no spoilers. And he was like, "I know, no, I know," and we had a little moment between us, and it was wonderful. So this game had a really big effect on me, and it is my game of the year. And the Game Awards are next month. I'm currently obviously recording this in November, so it's next month, and that the Plague Tale Requiem is now up for the nomination for Game of the Year. So I've voted for them. So fingers crossed they win. I do hope they win anyway. I think they deserve to win. But yeah, so this game to me, masterpiece. 10 out of 10. Perfect game. I loved it. Game of the year. Go out and play it. If you obviously go play the first one. If you haven't played the first one, please go and play it so you don't get lost. Because the game doesn't hold your hand in terms of story. It assumes that you've played the first game, that you know what's going on, and that you understand the characters and the macula and all that, and the whole idea of how it connects with the rats and so on and so forth, and the plague. So in terms of that, you need to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You need to play it for that. You know what I mean? Play the first game so you understand the story, and then play the sequel. If you play the first game and you're on the edge about the sequel, or if you haven't had the time, hopefully I've convinced you to play the second game. Obviously, I know I didn't go into spoilers. If I went into spoilers, I'd be here for it. I'd still be doing the review. I'd be here for hours and hours and hours, because there is so much to talk about, and I'd love to talk about the spoilers. I'd love to talk about the ending and all that jazz, but I just can't, because it's one of those where you just need to experience it for yourself. It is that good, you know. But yeah, so that's my thoughts and feelings on the Plague Tale Requiem. If you liked it, if you agreed with me, if you disagreed with me, if you played the game and you thought it wasn't all that great, or if you same as me, if you thought it was a masterpiece, again, by all means, please do let me know on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please like and subscribe and all that jazz, and to share it with your friends. If you're not subscribed to me on YouTube, just type in the Nerdstalgic podcast on YouTube and you'll find me there. Also, you can find this podcast on Spotify. You can find me on Anchor. You can find me on Google Podcasts. You can find me on Amazon Music Podcasts. You can find me on Audible. I am now on Audible. I have no idea how I got on Audible, but I am now on Audible. So if you listen on Audible and you don't want to listen to any sort of audio books, Audible has podcasts now. So you can go onto Audible, type in the Nerdstalgic podcast, and again, you can find me there. If you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to give me a rating. So underneath my title card on my Spotify, there are a group of stars. If you click on them stars, and you can then are given the option to rate from 5 stars to 1 star. 5 stars, best thing you've heard in your life. Literally, your life is now changed. You're a millionaire, and you're living on the living in Bermuda, sipping cocktails on the beach, absolutely loving life. You're welcome. 1 star, Vogon's doing poetry, your ears are bleeding and you can't make it stop it. Why won't the voices stop? Please make it stop. Will you stop? I can't stop. Please stop. You know what I mean? So whatever you feel like is fair, 1 to 5 stars. It greatly helps me out on Spotify's algorithm, because the higher my star rating, the higher up on the list I go on podcasts, and the more people can listen to the show, which means there's more things I can do in the future for you folks. Yeah, that's about it, really. Also, before I go, want to do my secret message, because as I mentioned at the beginning, not many of you folks stay to the end. So I'm probably talking to myself right now. There's probably nobody here listening to this part. But if you are here listening to this part, the secret code for today's episode is oh my god, that's a big rat. Literally, I want you to put "oh my god, that's a big rat" in higher case, exclamation marks, the lot, even maybe put a little emoji of a rat on as well. So "oh my god, that's a big rat." Send me that message just tweet me that message at nerdstalgic_pod on Twitter, and I will know that you stayed till the end. As of yet, as of recording this, I haven't had anybody message me back any of my secret code words, which is a little disappointing, but I still do them because I find it funny. Just to see who listens to the end. I know there are some people I know who listen to the end because they've told me, and they've proven it to me. But I just thought, it'd be a nice little thing to do this. So, one more time, wow, that's a big rat, or damn, that's a big rat, or just that's a big rat. Any one of those will work, as long as it's under those sort of lines. Just tweet me that at nerdstalgic_pod, and I will know that you stayed till the end of the episode. And yeah, so thank you very, very much for listening to me ramble, for talk about this fantastic game. Thank you for tuning to the Nerdstalgic podcast. I greatly appreciate you. I appreciate your time, because I know it's precious. And thank you ever so much for listening to me today. So I have been Luke. I have been your host, and I will catch you in the next one. All right then, guys. Cheerio.